Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. We're diving into a pivotal and intense chapter of 20th century history, the First Indochina War. This is a story of struggle, resilience, and the determination of a people fighting to reclaim their independence. The First Indochina War lasted from 1946 to 1954, pitting the Vietnamese nationalist forces, led by Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, against French colonial forces. But this war wasn't just about Vietnam versus France. It was entangled with larger global dynamics like the Cold War, communism, and decolonization. So, grab a coffee, settle in, and let's unravel this fascinating yet tragic conflict step by step. First, let's rewind. Vietnam, along with Laos and Cambodia, made up French Indochina, a French colony established in the late 19th century. The French controlled Vietnam's resources, exploited its labor, and maintained a rigid class system where Vietnamese people were second-class citizens in their own land. Under colonial rule, the Vietnamese economy was reshaped to serve France. Rice, rubber, and other resources were extracted for export. Meanwhile, most Vietnamese people lived in poverty. Education opportunities were limited, and any resistance to French rule was brutally suppressed. But resistance simmered. By the early 20th century, Vietnamese nationalists began organizing. Among them was a young man named Nguyen Sinh Cung, later known as Ho Chi Minh. Ho's travels to Europe, the US, and the Soviet Union exposed him to socialist and communist ideologies, which he believed could offer Vietnam a path to independence. Fast forward to World War II. In 1940, Japan occupied Vietnam, ousting the French but allowing them to administratively stay in power. This period was critical. It exposed the vulnerability of colonial powers. In 1941, Ho Chi Minh and his allies formed the Viet Minh, a coalition aimed at ending foreign rule and achieving independence. They didn't just fight the Japanese, they also prepared for the inevitable post-war power struggle. When Japan surrendered in 1945, there was a brief power vacuum. Ho Chi Minh seized the moment. On September 2, 1945, in Hanoi's Ba Dinh Square, he declared Vietnam's independence, quoting from the U.S. Declaration of Independence. But the celebrations were short-lived. The French, with support from Britain and even the U.S., sought to reassert control. Negotiations between the Viet Minh and France broke down, and by late 1946, war erupted. The First Indochina War officially began in December 1946, with French forces bombarding the northern city of Haiphong, killing thousands of civilians. The Viet Minh responded with guerrilla warfare, a strategy they'd used throughout the conflict. This wasn't a traditional war. The French had superior firepower, modern weaponry, and control over urban areas. But the Viet Minh, under the military leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap, excelled in guerrilla tactics. They operated in the dense jungles and rugged terrain, attacking French supply lines, ambushing troops, and rallying local support. The French relied heavily on their Foreign Legion and colonial troops from North Africa and Europe. Meanwhile, the Viet Minh received increasing support from communist allies like China, especially after the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949. By the early 1950s, the war was escalating. France was bleeding resources and morale, while the Viet Minh were growing stronger. But it wasn't just a Vietnamese-French conflict anymore. It became a Cold War battleground, with the U.S. backing France and the Soviet Union and China supporting the Viet Minh. Let's talk about the battle that changed everything: Dien Bien Phu. In 1953, the French decided to establish a major military base at Dien Bien Phu, a remote valley in northern Vietnam. Their goal: lure the Viet Minh into a decisive battle and crush them with superior firepower. But General Giap outmaneuvered them. Over several months, the Viet Minh secretly transported heavy artillery through rugged terrain, positioning them on the hills overlooking Dien Bien Phu. In March 1954, the battle began. For 56 days, the Viet Minh laid siege to the French base. They used trench warfare, constant bombardment, and relentless assaults. By May, the French were overwhelmed. On May 7, 1954, Dien Bien Phu fell, marking a humiliating defeat for France. The fall of Dien Bien Phu forced France to negotiate. In July 1954, the Geneva Accords were signed. Here's what was agreed. Vietnam would be temporarily divided at the 17th parallel. The North, led by Ho Chi Minh, would be communist. The South, under the leadership of Ngo Dinh Diem and supported by the U.S., would remain non-communist. Elections were supposed to reunify the country in 1956, but as we know, those elections never happened. Instead, this division set the stage for the Vietnam War or the Second Indochina War. So, why does this war matter? First, it marked the end of French colonialism in Southeast Asia. The war inspired other anti-colonial movements around the world, showing that a determined and united resistance could defeat a major colonial power. Second, it highlighted the Cold War's impact on regional conflicts. The U.S. involvement in Vietnam would only deepen, leading to the infamous Vietnam War. And finally, it's a testament to the Vietnamese people's resilience. Despite immense suffering, they never gave up their fight for self-determination. This war left scars on Vietnam, on France, and on the world. But it also reshaped global politics, shifting the balance of power in Southeast Asia. All right, that's a wrap on the First Indochina War. It's a story of struggle, endurance, and the complex interplay between local and global forces. If you found this video insightful, hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more history deep dives. And let me know in the comments what's your take on the First Indochina War. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember history is never just about the past. It's about understanding how we got here. See you in the next video.